That night, at the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio, the entire space seemed to hold its breath. The atmosphere was tense, electric, not unlike the moments before the curtain rises on a fateful battle. But the reason wasn't a chart-topping hit or a Hollywood star. It was the appearance of a living icon, Robert Downey Jr. From the depths of addiction to the pinnacle of glory, from tabloid headlines to the Oscar stage for Oppenheimer, Downey is more than just an actor. He is proof of rebirth. And tonight he's back, not as Tony Stark, but as himself, radiant with charisma and sharp as ever. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The studio erupted in applause as Robert Downey Jr. strode onto the stage, tossing a wink that sent the audience into a frenzy, as if Tony Stark had just landed in his spaceship. In a perfectly tailored suit, he exuded his signature confidence. Behind the desk, Jimmy Kimmel, squinting with a provocative smile, kicked things off. "Welcome Robert Downey Jr., the hero, the legend, the king of the red carpet," he declared, igniting cheers. "Still the coolest guy in the room, or are you past your prime, Robert?" The audience chuckled, but their eyes were expectant. Downey leaned back in his chair, flashing a sly look. "Jimmy, I've been cool since you were practicing jokes in front of a mirror. I'm here to talk about movies, life, and maybe fix your sense of humor." The audience roared with laughter, some shouting RDJ. Kimmel smirked, but his eyes betrayed a hint of unease. "Oh Robert, from tabloid fodder to Oscar gold, what's the journey been like? Spill the tea," he pressed. Robert Downey Jr., seated in the guest chair, legs crossed, eyes gleaming as if ready to strike. Jimmy Kimmel, smile still lingering, leaned toward Downey, tapping the desk lightly like a fighter sizing up his opponent. The stage lights blazed, but the air crackled with invisible sparks between the two men. "Robert, it's great to have you here," Kimmel began, his voice smooth but laced with a jab. "I mean, you're a living legend from Iron Man to Oppenheimer. But be real, did you ever think you'd, move beyond those superhero roles?" The question seemed harmless, but the way Kimmel emphasized move beyond made the audience pause, sensing a whiff of gunpowder. A few giggled, but most waited in silence for Downey's response. He raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a confident smirk. "Jimmy, you want to know if I moved beyond? I went from rock bottom to holding an Oscar, while you're still figuring out how to make people laugh without mentioning me." The audience erupted, laughter echoing through the studio. A man in the front row shouted, "That's right, RDJ." Downey raised a hand in acknowledgement, as if conducting the entire room. Kimmel laughed loudly, but his eyes flickered with tension, as if caught off guard by Downey's quick counter. Not backing down, Kimmel pressed on, his tone now sharper. "Oh, Robert, you sure know how to own a stage. But come on, you were the center of all sorts of Hollywood drama back in the day, right? From those chaotic times to now being the box office king. What's the secret to that comeback?" Downey tilted his head, his gaze still sharp, but his smile now carried a cold edge. "The secret, Jimmy? Definitely not cheap jokes like yours. I came back by getting up, fixing my mistakes, and working harder than the people trying to drag me down." He paused, locking eyes with Kimmel. "What about you? Ever tried doing something besides digging up people's pasts?" The audience exploded, applause mixing with cheers. In the control room backstage, producers started murmuring. One whispered through an earpiece, "Jimmy, go easy, don't push too far." But Kimmel, as if spurred by Downey's retort, decided to dig deeper. "Come on, Robert. You know I'm just kidding," he said, his tone falsely light. "But you've got to admit, Tony Stark saved your career, right? I mean, without that iron suit, where would you be?" Downey let out a laugh, but it wasn't a warm one. It was the laugh of someone who knew they were being challenged, and was ready to fire back. "Jimmy, you think Tony Stark saved me? No, I saved Tony Stark. I poured my heart and soul into that role, and the audience knows it." He pointed to the crowd, where applause erupted again. "What about you? What have you brought to this show besides recycled internet jokes?" The audience burst into laughter, some standing to clap, leaving Kimmel momentarily flustered, glancing down at his notes. Kimmel, sensing the audience leaning toward Downey, tried to regain control. "All right, Robert, you win this round," he said, raising his hands as if surrendering. But be honest, don't you get tired of people calling you Tony Stark? I mean, you've got an Oscar now. Downey shook his head, his smile now tinged with irony. Tired? Jimmy, I'm proud of Tony Stark. I'm proud I turned a character into an icon. But if you think that's all I am, you haven't done your homework. He turned to the audience, his voice soft but magnetic. You folks out there, you know who I am, right? The crowd roared, RDJ, and Tony shaking the studio. Kimmel, realizing he was losing ground, tried to cut in. Okay, you're a superstar, Robert, but let's talk about... He didn't finish before Downey interrupted, his voice calm but razor sharp. Jimmy, let me help you. We're going to talk about how to tell a meaningful story instead of just digging up people's pasts. Want to learn? The audience erupted, laughter and applause drowning out the background music. Kimmel, desperate to regain the upper hand, leaned forward, his tone carrying a veiled jab disguised as friendliness. Robert, you sure know how to charm a crowd, he said with a shrug. But come on, with all the glory from Iron Man to the Oscar, do you ever think you got lucky? I mean, not everyone gets a second chance from Hollywood, right? The question was a knife, hinting at Downey's past addiction, implying his success was merely the industry's leniency. Downey took a soft breath, his eyes flashing with danger, but he kept his cool. Lucky, Jimmy? You think I'm standing here because of luck? His voice was low, each word honed to a sharp edge. I fought every day to climb out of the darkness, not because Hollywood threw me a lifeline. I swam up with sweat, tears, and people who believed in me. He paused, staring straight at Kimmel. What about you? Ever wonder what you've done to earn this stage besides picking at other people's lives? Kimmel, cornered, tried to steady himself with a forced smile. Oh, Robert, don't get too serious, he said, his voice slightly shaky. I'm just saying your journey is epic. But come on, you were at the center of some major scandals. Didn't that make you strong? The words seemed like praise, but they were clearly an attempt to dig into Downey's past, hoping to provoke a misstep. In the control room, a producer whispered through an earpiece, Jimmy, pivot, he's running the show. But Kimmel, caught in his own game, ignored it. Downey leaned forward, his gaze now a blade cutting through Kimmel's facade. Scandals, Jimmy? You want to talk about the days I hit rock bottom? Fine. He paused, his voice shifting to a quiet intensity, as if telling a story just for the audience. I lost everything, my career, my freedom, my self-respect. But I learned one thing. The bottom isn't where you stay, it's where you stand up. I did that not because someone allowed it, but because I chose not to give up. Kimmel, sensing the audience fully behind Downey, tried to lighten the mood. That's an amazing story, Robert, he said, forcing enthusiasm. But come on, you've got to admit, Tony Stark was your golden ticket, right? Without that suit, would you be here today? Murmurs rippled through the audience, some shaking their heads, feeling Kimmel had crossed a line. Downey laughed, but it was a cold, cutting laugh, as if he just found his opponent's weak spot. Golden ticket, Jimmy? You think I'm just a lucky guy in a suit? No, I poured my soul into Tony Stark, made him an icon because I know what it's like to fall and get back up. He turned to the audience, his tone suddenly warm. You folks out there, you've fallen before, right? And you know how hard it is to stand up. In the control room, chaos brewed. A producer shouted into an earpiece, Jimmy, stop, he's owning the room. But Kimmel, swept up in the storm he'd created, threw another punch. All right, Robert, you sure know how to fire up a crowd, he said, his tone now tinged with bitterness. But come on, with all that drama back then, do you ever think you're, a role model for kids? Downey didn't flinch. He locked eyes with Kimmel, his gaze piercing. A role model? I'm not trying to be a role model, Jimmy. I'm trying to be human. I fell, I got up, and I tell people they can do the same. He stood from his chair. Not to leave, but to drive his point home. What about you? What do you use this stage for? To inspire, or to get views by kicking at old wounds? The audience exploded. Applause thundering, mixed with chants of RDJ. A man in the back row shouted, Finish him, Robert. Kimmel, now visibly rattled, forced a smile, but his hand trembled slightly on the mic. The studio air was now a furnace, every word between Robert Downey Jr. and Jimmy Kimmel like fuel on the fire. The audience, still buzzing from Downey's sharp comebacks, sat upright, eyes glued to the stage. Downey, with a calm demeanor but eyes like daggers, held the upper hand, his hand resting casually on his knee. Kimmel, though trying to seem relaxed, couldn't hide his tension, his smile now a fragile mask. Backstage, producers exchanged worried glances, one whispering through an earpiece, "Jimmy, ease up, he's eating you alive." Kimmel, spurred by the growing support for Downey, decided to throw a harder punch. He leaned forward, his tone feigning friendliness but sharp as thorns. "Robert, you really know how to make the audience love you," he said with a smirk. "But come on, with all that Hollywood glamour, don't you ever feel a bit out of touch? I mean, you live in mansions, fly private jets, play heroes. How do you relate to people struggling out there?" Downey raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a sardonic smile, but his eyes remained icy. "Out of touch, Jimmy? You think I don't know what struggle is?" His voice was low and deliberate, like someone gearing up for a knockout blow. "I've slept in dark alleys, lost everything because of my own mistakes. I know despair better than you can imagine." He paused, staring straight at Kimmel, as if piercing his confident facade. "And you? What do you know about struggle, sitting here safe in the spotlight, throwing stones at people who've been through hell?" Kimmel, feeling the audience's pressure, tried to lighten the mood by pivoting. "All right, Robert, I get it. You've come a long way," he said, his tone attempting reconciliation. "But come on, you were Hollywood's bad boy, right? Didn't those days help you? I don't know, act more authentically?" The question was a subtle trap, both praising and probing Downey's past to throw him off balance. In the control room, a producer muttered, "God, Jimmy, stop, you're digging your own grave." Downey didn't take the bait. He laughed, but it was a dry, cutting laugh, as if he saw right through Kimmel's intent. "Bad boy, Jimmy? That's what you call someone who hit rock bottom and pulled themselves up?" He leaned forward, his tone now laced with sarcasm but commanding. "Those days taught me one thing. Life isn't a script you rewrite for laughs. I bring that pain to every role, every story. And you? What do you bring to these jokes besides trying to make me look like a punchline?" Kimmel, visibly flustered, tried to interrupt to regain control. "Come on, Robert. I'm just warming up the stage," he said, raising his hands as if to calm things down. "But look, you've got an Oscar. You're a superstar. You must feel pressure to always be the hero, right? I mean, how do you stay perfect like Tony Stark?" Downey shook his head, his eyes now like embers, but his voice remained calm, magnetic. "Perfect? Jimmy, I'm not trying to be a hero, and I'm sure as hell not trying to be Tony Stark in real life. I'm just trying to be a father, a husband, someone who knows the value of getting up after a fall." He turned to the audience, his tone warm, as if speaking to each of them. "You folks out there, ever feel like you're not perfect enough? I do too, but I've learned your truth, your scars, your mistakes, that's what makes you strong." The audience leapt to their feet, applause thundering, some wiping tears. Kimmel, now completely on the ropes, tried to interject with a weak joke. "Wow, Robert, you should be a motivational speaker," he said, but his voice trembled, and the audience responded with only scattered chuckles. Downey, not giving Kimmel a chance to breathe, pressed on, his voice now a razor's edge. "Jimmy, you know what's really funny? You think you can define me with a few jokes, but I redefined myself long ago. Try doing that for yourself instead of just throwing stones from here." The audience erupted again, applause so loud it drowned out the background music. A young guy filmed, ignoring glares from security. In the control room, a producer shouted through an earpiece, "Jimmy, change the topic now." But Kimmel, face flushed, seemed to hear nothing, his eyes dazed. Kimmel, like a boxer backed into a corner, decided to throw a desperate punch to regain ground. He cleared his throat, forcing a strained smile to ease the tension. "Robert, you're one hell of a speaker," he said, his voice trying to sound cheerful but betraying bitterness. "But come on, with all your glamour, Oscar, mansions, supercars, do you really think you're inspiring to everyone? I mean, you're a Hollywood star, not a saint." The words were a poisoned arrow, suggesting Downey was just a celebrity cloaked in morality, disconnected from regular people. The audience fell silent, a few shaking their heads. "That's low," muttered from the back row. Downey, unfazed, tilted his head, his eyes like sparks shooting straight at Kimmel. "Hollywood star, saint. You love slapping labels, don't you, Jimmy?" he replied, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "I'm not trying to be either. I'm just a guy who fell, lost everything and learned life's about getting up, not flaunting mansions or cars." He turned to the audience, his tone suddenly warm, like a friend confiding. "You folks out there, ever feel defined by your mistakes? I got past that and you can too." Kimmel, now stripped of his confidence, tried to interject to salvage the situation. "All right, Robert, I get it. You're inspiring," he said, his voice trembling, hands waving as if to dispel the pressure. "But come on, you know, the infamous bad boy. Now you're here talking about rising up, but didn't Hollywood save you? I mean, without those big roles, where would you be?" The question was a low blow, deliberately dragging up Downey's past to shake him. In the control room, a producer slammed a hand on the desk, muttering, "Jimmy, you're insane, stop now." But Kimmel, caught in the storm he'd created, kept staring at Downey with a defiant glare. Downey laughed loudly, but it was a chilling, razor-sharp laugh, like a fighter ready to deliver a knockout. "Hollywood saved me? Jimmy, you're wrong," he said, his voice now like a symphony, powerful and captivating. "I saved myself. Hollywood gave me a stage, but I'm the one who rewrote my story, through sweat, tears, and sleepless nights." He paused, locking eyes with Kimmel. "And you? What do you do with this stage? Build something or just tear things down?" Kimmel, now like a cornered animal, tried to regain ground with a desperate joke. "Robert, you sure know how to heat up a stage," he said, his voice feigning cheer but betraying panic. "But come on, don't you ever think this is a talk show, we're just having fun, right?" Downey, sensing the tide fully in his favor, stood from his chair, not to leave but to assert his presence. "Fun, Jimmy? You call digging up people's lives fun?" His voice was a hammer, powerful without needing to shout. "I came here to talk about movies, about meaningful things, but you just want to turn me into a punchline. So let me ask, what do you use this stage for? To inspire or to get views by trampling others?" The audience, swept up in a fever of emotion, leapt to their feet, eyes glued to Downey, who stood tall, his presence overwhelming like a general in battle. Kimmel, face flushed, his mic trembling in his hand, tried to hold on to his composure, but his eyes betrayed sheer panic. The crowd's boos echoed, mixed with chants of "RDJ," like a tidal wave, shaking the studio. Backstage, the producers were nearly paralyzed, one shouting through an earpiece, "Jimmy, stop, you've lost." But Kimmel, like a boxer backed into a corner, decided to throw one last reckless bitter punch. Kimmel cleared his throat, forcing a crooked smile, his voice now tinged with desperation. "Robert, you sure know how to own a crowd," he said, hands flailing as if to wave off the pressure. "But come on, with all this rising up talk, aren't you just a product of Hollywood? I mean, without those big directors, those juicy scripts, would you be standing here with all that glamour?" Downey, standing firm like a mountain, his eyes blazing but his voice calm, like someone who'd seen through every trick. "A product of Hollywood, Jimmy," he repeated, his voice low like a powerful symphony. "You think directors and scripts pulled me out of the abyss? No, I'm here because I fought myself, because I had people like my wife Susan, who never gave up on me." He paused, turning to the audience, his tone suddenly warm, like a brother sharing a confidence. "You folks out there ever feel like you had no more chances? I did, but I learned chances don't come from Hollywood, they come from your own heart." Kimmel, now like a ship adrift in a storm, tried to cut in with a trembling voice. "Robert, I'm just trying to make things interesting," he stammered, but the audience's boos drowned him out. An older man in the back row shouted, "You call that interesting? Shame on you." Downey, not giving Kimmel a chance to breathe, pressed on, his voice like a hammer striking. "Interesting, Jimmy? You think turning someone's pain into a joke is interesting? I came here to talk about movies, about hope, but you just want to dig up scars for views." He stepped closer to the stage's edge, looking straight at the audience. "You all deserve to hear meaningful stories, not cheap jokes from someone who doesn't get the value of truth." In the control room, backstage was chaos. A producer yelled through an earpiece, "Cut to commercial now." But Kimmel, trapped in the nightmare he'd created, tried one last joke to save face. "Robert, come on, you're turning this talk show into a sermon," he said, his voice weak, forcing a strained smile, but the audience didn't bite, responding instead with louder boos like a wave rejecting his pretense. Downey, sensing the moment was ripe, slowly stepped closer to the stage's edge, his eyes still locked on Kimmel. "Jimmy, I don't need this stage to prove who I am," he said, his voice calm but resounding like a declaration. "I've told my story through my films, through the days I rose from ashes, and through the people who believed in me. You want to make jokes? Go ahead, but truth is always stronger than cheap shots." He paused, turning to the audience, raising a hand as if embracing the entire room. "Thank you all for listening to the real story." The stage was now like a battlefield after a storm, the lights still blazing but unable to mask the stifling silence. Robert Downey Jr. had just left, leaving behind thunderous applause from the audience, who stood there, eyes glistening, as if they'd witnessed a historic moment. Jimmy Kimmel stood alone behind the desk, mic dangling, his face pale as if drained of life. Sporadic boos still echoed, mixed with murmurs of discontent from the crowd. An older man in the back row shook his head, saying to his friend, he brought this loss on himself. Backstage, the control room was like a hornet's nest, producers shouting into headsets. Cut to commercial. "We've lost control." Kimmel, trying to regain composure, cleared his throat, his voice now trembling, almost lost. "Come on, folks. That was just a bit of fun, right?" he said, forcing a smile, but the audience responded with cold silence. A young woman in the middle row stood up, arms crossed, muttering, "Fun? That was pathetic." A group of audience members began leaving the studio, their heavy footsteps signaling disappointment. An older woman turned back, pointing at Kimmel, shouting, "You should learn to respect people." Her words were a final dagger, making Kimmel freeze, gripping the desk's edge to steady himself. In the control room, chaos peaked. A producer, hair slick with sweat, yelled into a mic, "Jimmy, apologize now or we're done." Kimmel, as if prodded, spoke hesitantly. "All right, folks, maybe I went a bit too far," he said, his voice weak, like a child caught misbehaving. "Robert's a great guy. I was just trying to heat up the show." But the half-hearted apology only fueled the audience's anger. A boo rang out from a corner of the studio. "Too late, Jimmy." A young man filmed with his phone, ignoring security's attempts to stop him, whispering to his friend, "This is going viral right now." And as predicted, the moment Downey left the stage exploded on social media, before the show even ended. Audience videos, though blurry, spread like wildfire on X. One user posted a clip of Downey's speech, captioning it, "RDJ just schooled Jimmy Kimmel on authenticity. Legend." The post racked up thousands of shares. Another wrote, "Kimmel thought he could turn RDJ's past into a joke. Biggest mistake of his life." A video of the audience standing and clapping as Downey exited garnered millions of views in minutes. A young woman tweeted, "Not a Marvel fan, but Robert Downey Jr. just spoke for everyone who's ever been underestimated." In the studio, Kimmel tried to continue the show, segueing to a commercial break, but the audience wasn't listening. A group of young people in the front row were busy sharing videos on their phones, whispering, "This is gonna blow up online." A lighting technician near the stage muttered to a colleague, "Kimmel dug his own grave. Downey just made this stage his." The commercial music played, but it couldn't drown out the chaos. A producer, face flushed, slammed a hand on the desk. "We need damage control now. They're all filming." The wave of support for Downey grew stronger. A post from a fan account read, "RDJ didn't just shut down Kimmel. He reminded us anyone can rise from mistakes. Thank you, Robert." It got tens of thousands of likes, with comments like, "This is why I love RDJ," and "Kimmel needs to rethink how to host a show." Another video, capturing Downey staring down Kimmel while talking about truth, was shared with the caption, "When RDJ speaks, the world listens." Some started making memes, comparing Downey to Tony Stark wrecking Kimmel like he took down enemies in Avengers. A standout meme showed Downey leaving the stage, next to the text, "When you go on a talk show but end up teaching the world a lesson in resilience." Meanwhile, criticism of Kimmel surged. One user wrote, "Kimmel thought joking about addiction was funny? So disappointing." Another posted, "Jimmy Kimmel just shot himself in the foot on live TV. Who's hiring this guy to host anymore?" Some audience members still in the studio began heated discussions. An older man told his wife Downey was right. Truth is stronger than jokes. Kimmel should learn that. A young woman still filming on her phone whispered to her friend, "I'm posting this. People need to see how amazing RDJ was." The fallout in the studio didn't stop at Kimmel's discomfort. Some audience members, offended on Downey's behalf, left the venue before the show ended, leaving empty seats as a silent statement. A security guard shook his head, telling a colleague, "I've never seen an audience react like this." Kimmel brought it on himself. In the control room, a producer sighed, staring at the X-posts flooding the monitors, muttering, "This isn't just a bad episode, it's a disaster." As the show paused for a commercial break, Kimmel slumped in his chair, eyes vacant, as if realizing he'd lost not just the audience but his own credibility. Meanwhile, the image of Downey walking off the stage, head held high, lingered in everyone's minds, a symbol of resilience and authenticity, ready to spread worldwide through the viral videos exploding online. The storm from Jimmy Kimmel Live didn't end when the stage lights dimmed. Robert Downey Jr., with his proud exit, had planted a seed that spread far beyond the studio walls. While Kimmel's show descended into chaos, the event became a cultural phenomenon, sparking deep discussions about resilience, authenticity, and how the media handles personal stories. In the days that followed, Downey's impact not only shook the entertainment industry, but also touched the hearts of millions worldwide. Kimmel's show faced severe consequences. Ratings plummeted as viewers offended by his tactless hosting turned away in droves. Posts flooded with criticism. One user writing, "Kimmel lost all my respect after how he treated RDJ. Talk shows aren't for digging up pain." A quiet boycott formed, with thousands vowing to stop watching. Some sponsors began pulling ads, plunging the production team into crisis. In an emergency meeting, a producer sighed, "We underestimated Downey. He's not just a star, he's an icon." Kimmel, though trying to carry on with subsequent episodes, couldn't escape the shadow of his failure, his eyes now carrying a pensive look, as if questioning how he'd let things spiral out of control. Meanwhile, Downey became an unexpected beacon of inspiration. Mental health organizations, moved by his speech, extended collaboration offers. A prominent nonprofit publicly invited Downey to be an ambassador. Writing, Robert Downey Jr. showed resilience can change lives. We'd be honored to have him join us. Downey, with his discreet but sincere style, accepted a few offers, appearing in campaigns encouraging those struggling with addiction to seek help. A PSA video, where Downey said, "You don't need to be perfect, just start again," garnered millions of views, igniting hope for those who felt they had no way out. Inspired by Downey, fans organized a charity event called Downey's Second Chance. Hundreds gathered in a Los Angeles park, raising funds for addiction recovery and mental health programs. A young woman, a former addict, stood on the event stage, voice breaking, "RDJ showed me I'm not defined by my past. He's why I'm here today." The image of her holding a poster with Downey moment went viral, becoming a symbol of recovery's power. X-posts overflowed with stories from people sharing their journeys of overcoming hardship, turning it into a movement celebrating resilience. The press and cultural commentators quickly framed the event as a turning point. A major newspaper article titled "Downey Moment, When a Star Turned a Stage into a Lesson in Truth," wrote, "Robert Downey Jr. didn't just shut down Jimmy Kimmel, he challenged how media exploits personal pain for views." A TV critic remarked, "Downey did what few stars dare, stood up to ridicule and turned it into a life-changing message." Podcasts and analysis videos dissected every moment, from Downey's piercing gaze to Kimmel's fluster, making the event a hotbed of debate about media ethics. Downey, without directly addressing the incident, subtly reinforced his message with a social media post. He wrote, "Life is a journey, not a headline. Get up, love, and believe in yourself. Thank you for being along for the ride." The post garnered millions of interactions, from fans to strangers, with one standout comment, "RDJ, you're not just a hero on screen, you're a hero of truth." Some colleagues voiced support, with Chris Hemsworth posting, "Respect Robert, you're always the realist." These words amplified Downey's influence, cementing him as a symbol of courage and authenticity. The event didn't just shift perceptions. It sparked a powerful message. Truth and resilience can overcome any prejudice. Schools began showing Downey's speech in classrooms, encouraging students to discuss overcoming mistakes. A teacher shared, "My students see themselves in RDJ's story, that anyone can write a new chapter for their life." This message, like a flame, spread to those who felt cast aside by society, reminding them their worth isn't in others' judgmental eyes. Kimmel, in the weeks that followed, tried to rebuild his image by inviting big-name guests, but the shadow of Downey moment lingered. Some viewers noted he was more cautious, less likely to make personal jabs. A producer whispered backstage, "Jimmy learned a hard lesson, don't mess with someone like Downey." Meanwhile, Downey kept shining, returning to film sets with a confident smile, as if the event was just a small chapter in his journey. He didn't need Kimmel's stage to prove himself, because he'd already done that through his life. The story of Robert Downey Jr. facing off with Jimmy Kimmel on Jimmy Kimmel Live reflects a deeper truth about American society today. Media culture often exploits personal pain for views, overlooking the value of authenticity and resilience. In the story, Kimmel repeatedly mocked Downey's past addiction, representing the media's tactless tendencies, while Downey, with his wit and honesty, turned the stage into a platform for inspiration, emphasizing that the past doesn't define a person. The moment he left the stage to thunderous applause, coupled with the Downey moment wave spreading on social media, showed the power of truth and courage in facing judgment. This event echoes how Americans today, especially in the age of social media, often face pressure from being stereotyped by past mistakes, or having their image distorted by the media. The lesson for real life in the U.S., where cancel culture and snap judgments dominate, is that Downey's story teaches us authenticity and rising from failure are key to overcoming prejudice. Instead of letting criticism like Kimmel's define you, follow Downey's example, face your past with pride and use it to inspire. For instance, when judged by colleagues or social media, focus on your personal journey, like how Downey mentioned his wife Susan and those who believed in him. Moreover, the Downey's Second Chance event in the story encourages building supportive communities, like joining charities or sharing stories to help others overcome struggles. Live authentically, stay resilient, and turn every challenge into a chance to shine, as Downey did. Subscribe to the channel to spread inspiring stories like Robert Downey Jr.'s resilient journey. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video with more unforgettable moments.